Are you hitting the file upload limitations of 100 megabytes using Cloudflare Tunnel? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your own Cloudflare tunnel, or actually a Pangolin tunnel. So we're going to set up our own virtual private server with an Oracle free tier account, and we're going to be using only the always free services on Oracle so that everything that we're doing is free. So in this tutorial, I will be setting up our Pangolin tunnel, and I will be hosting my own home server on a virtual machine on my computer here. We're going to install Pangolin on the virtual private server, and I will install the Pangolin client on my virtual server at home, representing my home server. And the application that we are going to be tunneling to is going to be Immich. I'm going to show you how to tunnel directly to Immich. I'm going to show you how to tunnel to a reverse proxy on our server, which will then proxy us to Immich using both HTTP and HTTPS. And I'll talk to you about why we would want to tunnel from Pangolin to our own reverse proxy, and even using HTTPS. Now, why are we not just port forwarding from our own server? Well, having the virtual private server gives us a abstraction layer away from our home network. So we don't have to expose our IP. We don't have to open any ports to our network. So we get that kind of layer of protection if we ever need to shut down that virtual private server or change the static IP address, we can do that. So let's get started. So before we get going, let's just take a quick look at what our network diagram is going to look like. So here is our virtual private server. We're going to be using Oracle Cloud, very generous free tier. We get 4 CPUs and 24 gigabytes of memory, and we can split that up as we like. I'm already using 3 CPUs and 16 gigabytes of memory, so I think for this tutorial I will try using 1 CPU and 8 gigabytes of memory in a new instance. Now, Pangolin is running Traefik under the hood as the reverse proxy, and we're also going to get CrowdSec set up, and I'm going to just show you what that looks like and kind of what the bouncers look like. We're gonna have a bouncer in Traefik, and we're gonna have a bouncer at the firewall level, and we'll go ahead and ban our IP address and see what that looks like to be banned, and then we'll lift that ban, of course. Now, once we get Pangolin installed on the server, we're gonna set up a public DNS record so that we can access our Pangolin admin interface. And we're going to be doing that directly from the public web, right? We're going to be using the static IP address of our private cloud server. Once we can do that, we are going to set up a tunnel. So in my VirtualBox VM, we're going to set up a server, and we're going to set up the Pangolin client. We'll set up Immich. We'll also set up Nginx reverse proxy. We'll make sure that this is working, and then we are going to have Pangolin talk directly to Immich. That's what we're going to do first. Then we're going to have Pangolin talk to Nginx Proxy Manager via HTTP, and then we're going to have Pangolin talk to Nginx Proxy Manager with HTTPS. And that just gives you a whole range of possibilities with context awareness DNS. You can watch my tutorial up here for kind of how to set up Pi-hole or AdGuard Home as your home DNS server, as well as your Tailscale DNS server. So everything, if you're on the home network or Tailscale network, that'll just resolve those domains directly to your own proxy over HTTPS. That way, just all connections are going to use the same HTTPS block on your Nginx or Nginx Proxy Manager reverse proxy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and set up our Oracle server. Okay, we're gonna go to oracle.com/cloud, and we're gonna go ahead and sign in. If you don't already have an account, go ahead and create one. and we are only using always free tier resources. Okay, so before I actually create a VM instance, I find it a little easier to go ahead and create a VCN, a virtual cloud network, and a subnet. So let's go ahead and do that first. Just type in VCN and we'll go right here, and then go ahead and hit create VCN. I'll call this Thomas Wild Tech. And then for the CIDR block, we'll just use the IPv4 example. So 10.0.0.0/16. DNS label, we can give it whatever we want. I'll just stick with the default here, which is going to be the VCN name. Okay, and then we just hit create VCN. Okay, now that we're in the VCN settings, let's go to subnets, and then we're going to hit create subnet, and I'll call this Thomas Wild Tech subnet. We're going to keep the default setting here on regional. And then for the CIDR block, I'll just use the example again. Okay, we'll keep the routes here. And then the important thing here is the public subnet. So allow public IP addresses for instances in this subnet. We need that to be public. Okay, for the DNS label, this can be whatever we like. Again, we'll just say DNS. And then the DNS domain name is dns.thomaswildtech. Okay, we're not going to worry about the security list just yet. We'll get there when we need to open up ports. So go ahead and create that subnet and let it provision. Okay, and now it is available. It just took a few seconds, really. Okay, now we want to actually create our VM, our server. So if I search VM, we'll find instances compute. So this is where we want to go to create an instance. So we have a nice little warning here that just reminds us what we get on our always free tier, and that is 4 OCPUs and 24 gigabytes of memory. So I'm already using 3 and 18. So I'm going to be using 1 OCPU and 6 gigabytes of memory. You also do get 2 micro instances, standard micro instances, but we are going to go ahead and use the Amper A1 compute here. So let's create an instance. I'll call it Thomas Wild Tech Demo. We can use any availability domain. So it is possible that it says that one of these is not available when we try to create it, and then we would just select a different one. So that's fine. We'll just stick with the default there. Okay, so the image and shape, we're going to change this, and I just want to run Ubuntu, and then let's go ahead and run this latest 24.04 version, and we'll go ahead and select that as our image. Okay, so the shape is already what I want it to be. I have the 1 core OCPU, 6 gigabytes of memory. If I wanted to change that, I could hit change shape. I could change these amounts. So I could change that to 2, which would change that to 6, or sorry, to 12, but we're gonna stick with the 1 and 6 so that I can remain in the free tier. Now, if you just want one server, one virtual private server, you can go all the way and max it out with the 4 CPUs and 24 gigabytes of memory. So we're going to stick with the 1 core, 6 gigabytes. Let's go to next. Okay, I don't need to enable these. So we're going to go to next. For the VNIC, I believe we can just provide whatever name we want to give this. So I will give it Thomas Wild Tech VNIC. And then we're going to select existing VCN, virtual cloud network, because we already created one. So we're going to select the Thomas Wild Tech here. That's the one that I created. And then we're also going to select an existing subnet, and that is the subnet that I also created right after I created the VCN. We'll stick with the automatically assigned private IPv4 address. And then we'll just go ahead and allow Oracle to generate a SSH key pair for us so that we can SSH into our instance. And I'll go ahead and just download this private key. We're going to need that to SSH. And I might put this somewhere a little safer than my downloads folder. So I'll create a Thomas Wild Tech folder in my documents, and we'll move that private key right over here. And I might just call it Oracle PK. So we click next. Okay, we have a boot volume here. I'm going to just use all the default settings. I'm going to click next. Okay, and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and hit create. Okay, so like I said before, it says it's out of capacity for this shape in the 83 availability domain. So we can just change the availability domain to a different one. Let's try 81 and then go back to review and then hit create. All right, so it is provisioning our instance here that I called Thomas Wildtech demo, and we'll just wait for this to complete before we can SSH into it. So it says that it has completed or succeeded in creating the instance. So let's go to the details tab to see if we get a public IP address. So here it is. So let's go ahead and just try to create a shell into our server. And what we want to do is grab the path to that private key that we downloaded. So I'm going to click on that and I'll go ahead and right click and then I'll say copy as path. And then we will do an SSH-I and then Control-Shift-V to paste. And then the user is going to be Ubuntu and then it's going to be at the static IP address. Okay, so it timed out. Okay, let's go to the networking tab of our instance here and then come down to the very bottom to quick actions and connect public subnet to internet. So let's go ahead and click on that button right there. And then I'll just change this Thomas Wildtech and let's hit create and then we'll hit close. Okay, so let's try our SSH command one more time and I'll say yes. And now we are in the server. The way that we're going to install Pangolin is with the script because it just makes it really easy, creates all the directories for us with the config files. I will just go ahead and install Docker myself onto our server here. So let me go ahead and just search Docker Engine install, and I'm going to click on Ubuntu, and then let's just go ahead and get that installed ourselves. So I'm going to copy this command here and we're going to paste that and come back here and we're going to copy this command to actually install Docker. Okay, so now we have Docker installed. Let's go ahead and create a directory where we're going to store our Docker projects. So I'll say make directory Docker and then let's cd into Docker, and then let's also make a directory for Pangolin. And then instead of using the command line from here on out, I think I am just going to use VS Code Server so that I can show you the file tree, the editor, and the terminal all in one page. So I'm going to use the Remote Explorer. Let's create a new connection. So I'm going to get this path one more time here. Copy as path, and we're going to do an SSH-I, paste that path, and then Ubuntu at our public IP address. Let's grab that guy and paste that there. Going to add it to my config, and let's open and let's go ahead and connect. So we're going to choose Linux here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit open folder. And let's go ahead and go right into that Docker folder and click OK. And great, now I can see that Pangolin folder that I created in there in the terminal. Now again, you don't have to use VS Code Server. I am just using it so that I can demonstrate the file structure, the files that are being created, the terminal, and the editor all in one page. So let me go ahead and open up a terminal so I can issue some commands here. I'm going to go ahead and cd into that Pangolin folder. This is where I want the compose file and all the config files to go. So let's look at the installation docs here. It says the installer will place all files in the current directory. So that's perfect. We are just going to go ahead and grab this and paste that right in there. And now that we've done that, we're just going to run this command to run the installer. Paste that right there. Okay, so the first thing it's going to ask is our base domain. So it's going to kind of assume that we're going to be routing subdomains of our base domain through this Pangolin instance. So I'm going to choose Thomas Wildtech. So no real, even if I'm using Thomas Wildtech somewhere else, we're going to be using the DNS challenge to pull certificates for HTTPS. And then you're going to create it's going to create a subdomain pangolin yourdomain.com. So I'm going to choose thomaswildtech.com. And then the Pangolin dashboard, it's going to give me a default of pangolin.mydomain.com. So I'm just going to use the default here. That's fine with me. And then we do need a valid email address for the Let's Encrypt certificates. So whenever you set up Let's Encrypt with certbot, you always provide an email address. And then do we want to use Gerbil to allow tunneled connections? So the default is yes. The whole point that we are using Pangolin for is for the tunnel. You can just use it as a local install and not set up the Gerbil tunnel, but we're using this as a tunnel. So we're going to go with the default. So enable email functionality. The default is no. So I'm just going to roll with the assumption we don't have an SMTP server set up to send out invites to other admins. It's just going to be us. So we can always add the email functionality later if we want to. So I'm going to stick with no. Would you like to install and start the containers? The default is yes. And yes, that's what I want to do. So here we go. It's basically already running our Docker Compose up to start the containers, which is pretty cool. After it does that, it's going to prompt us and ask, do we also want to set up CrowdSec? And we are going to say yes. So let's just wait for it to get to that point. Okay, would you like to install CrowdSec? So yes, CrowdSec is just an awesome security feature, which is going to block IP addresses that it detects malicious behavior. And it's also just going to include a whole block list from its own crowdsourcing of malicious IPs. So we are going to select yes. And then are we willing to manage CrowdSec? So we're also just going to say yes. There's not really a whole lot we have to do, but I will show you some of the basics of using CrowdSec. So yes. So it's going to basically do a Docker Compose down. It's going to add let's see if I can go ahead and open these up a little bit. Yeah, it's got the Docker Compose there. It's going to modify the Docker Compose to include CrowdSec, and we're going to get that up and running. Now, before we can actually visit this site to go to our Pangolin dashboard, I am going to need to create the DNS record that points our domain to this IP address. And then I'm also going to set up the DNS challenge to get it's just such an easy way to get SSL certs, and we'll use that. I'm going to be using Cloudflare as my DNS provider, so we're also going to get the Cloudflare API key. So let's hop over and go to Cloudflare. This is my DNS provider. So I'm going to hop into my Thomas Wild Tech domain and then go to DNS. And then we're basically just going to create an A record. So I'm going to do Pangolin, which is my dashboard. And then that's going to be the subdomain, so the full domain, pangolin.thomaswildtech.com. And then it's going to point to this IPv4 address. So that is our public IPv4 address. So let's go ahead and paste that in there. And we're not using Cloudflare Proxy. This is just a DNS record. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the wildcard certificates, because I like how I can just get a certificate for my domain name and a certificate for just a wildcard subdomain. And then that way I never have to worry about certificates for that domain again, because that wildcard is going to support all subdomains. So we're going to go in and modify the Traefik config.yaml. And that's going to be in config and then Traefik and then Traefik config. Okay, we're going to find this block right here, certificate resolvers, and then let's encrypt. Okay, so that is right here. Let's go ahead and make that modification. So I'll just go ahead and copy this whole guy, and then I'll redo the email address in there. Now we need to add the domain and wildcard domain to the domain section of the next router in the dynamic config. So let's go ahead and save this if we can. It might be owned by root. So I can set the ownership to the Ubuntu user for these config files. That is totally fine. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do a sudo chown ubuntu, and this is going to make the config/Traefik/Traefik config.yml. And let's see if I can save it now. And I can. I'm going to go ahead and do this for the dynamic config too. And let's open up the dynamic config and let's find that next router. And then again, I think I'm just going to go ahead and copy this whole section here. I'm just going to change the domains here. That's all I have to really do. And just fix the tabbing on that. So this was pangolin.thomaswildtech.com. And then we're going to get a certificate. We'll just go ahead and get one for Thomas Wild Tech. And then also with the wildcard for Thomas Wild Tech as well. Let's save that. Okay, and then lastly, we need to add the environmental variables for our DNS provider. So this allows Traefik to authenticate with your DNS provider to create the DNS records needed for the challenge. So in that Docker Compose file, we're just going to grab that environment section, and I think I need to set the ownership for the Docker Compose file as well. So that is just the Docker Compose.yml, and this is in the Traefik container. So we're going to find the Traefik container. It's right here, and they put it right above volume, so we can do that. And again, just the tabbing, just make sure that the tabbing is correct. So it should look like that. And then we're going to go fetch our API token. So let's go ahead and grab an API token. So I'm just going to go ahead and search API token, and we can go into the profile settings and go to create token. And then we're just going to use the edit zone DNS template. So that's all we really need to do. So we already have the zone DNS edit, and then we're going to choose our domain. So specific zone, you could choose all zones if you wanted to, and that's the Thomas Wild Tech. And then we're going to continue to summary and create the token. And that is all we had to do. So just copy that, and we're going to paste that right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a Docker Compose down, sudo Docker Compose down. We're going to take it back up with our new SSL certificate settings. Okay, and let's take the containers back up. Sudo Docker Compose up -d. Okay, and then if we look at the acme.json file, we should see that we have certificates for our domain and subdomains. So we should be able to reach our Pangolin. Let's go to pangolin.thomaswildtech.com, and the first thing that we'll see is that we can't reach the page, and the reason being is because we haven't opened up ports 80 and 443. So we do need to make sure that we do that. So the ports that we want to open are TCP ports for 80, 443, and UDP port for 51820. So let's go ahead and make sure we have those. We're going to go to our VM here, and then we're going to go to that subnet that this is part of. So go to the subnet, and then go to the security tab of the subnet, and then go to the default security list, and then click on security rules. Okay, so you can see that we have port 22 open for SSH. We need to create TCP ports for 80 and 443. So let's add an ingress rule. So the source is going to be all IPs. The source port, we're going to say all, and then the destination, we're going to say 80. And then we'll say the description is HTTP, and then add the rule. So let's do the same thing. I guess I could have added another one. That would have been easier. Again, all, and then 443, and then we're going to say this is HTTPS. And then let's go ahead and add another one. So again, for now, we are just going to set this to all IP addresses. This is going to be using UDP. Port range is all. The destination port is going to be the 51820. And then we can give this a description, Pangolin Wireguard. So we need that port open for our tunnel to work. And we'll say add those rules. So 80, 443, 51820. Okay, so now let's see if we are open, and boom. Okay, we're into our Pangolin server here with HTTPS, secure connection, and let's go ahead and get set up. So we'll give an email and some passwords and go ahead and create the admin account. Oh, we need some special characters. Okay, we have our admin account. Let's go ahead and log in. Okay, and let's go ahead and create an organization. So I'll call it Thomas Wild Tech. Okay, and now we are into the Pangolin interface. So now we can start configuring our routes to our applications. The way that this generally works is that you create a site and a resource. So the site is going to hold just the general information about the site, and then the resource is going to be specifically how we're routing. That way we can kind of configure our permissions for the site in general, and that's associated with the site. So before we proceed here, let's go ahead and set up an application on our home server. Let's set up Immich running. So once again, I'm going to use VS Code again to log into my local server, my home server, if you will. So I'm just going to do an SSH Thomas at, this is going to be the local IP address of my home server here. And let's go ahead and connect to it. Linux and continue, and then enter my password. Let's go ahead and create a Docker folder inside of my user folder. So I'm going to do a make directory Docker, and then that way I can open it up here in VS Code. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, let me just go ahead and create Immich running on the server. So we have an application. So I'm going to create a folder for Immich. As quickly as I can, we're going to go through the Immich getting started. Okay, so we can get the Docker Compose and the env file with just the wget command. And let's run that to get the Docker Compose file. So let's cd into Immich. And now we have the Docker Compose file. Let's do the same thing for the .env file. And now we have the .env file. So let's hop into the env file, and we're going to use the default locations for the library and the database. The library is something that you would want to use a path that actually goes to your mounted large hard drive. So I'm just going to be using the internal hard drive. We're not going to be taking up too much space. Now I do need to actually install Docker on here too. So I'm just going to run through this installation again very fast, and copy and paste. Okay, and then let's just go ahead and get Immich up and running real quick by navigating directly to it with the IP address. So I forgot to actually take it up. So sudo docker compose up and d. Okay, so those should be up and running. And we're going to navigate to the IP address, the local IP address of my server, my VirtualBox Ubuntu server, and then the port 2283. And then we can see that we have Immich up and running. So let's go ahead and just get Immich set up with a admin and a password. Go ahead and give it my name. And let's log in. So I'm going to stick with the defaults for now. And we're done. Let's go ahead and upload one image. I'll go ahead and upload 5 images. Let's go ahead and do that. And it's already pulling it in. Okay, so we have our Immich running on our local server here. Let's go ahead and configure our Pangolin terminal. So back to Pangolin, we're going to create a site, and we're going to call this Immich. And then we are going to use the Nginx tunnel. So this is kind of like the Cloudflare tunnel, except we're basically using Pangolin's version. So this is the Nginx tunnel. And then we have our credentials. So we need to save these 3 variables here, the endpoint, the ID, and the secret. And then we're going to choose Docker, and it's going to automatically create our ID and secret in here. So let's actually go ahead and copy this. And then let's create a folder in our Docker folder called Nginx, and then create a Docker compose .yaml, and let's paste that in there. Okay, we don't have to get that up and running just yet, but we'll go and do create site. And then I'm not going to enable Docker socket. I don't want this to run a discovery of other containers. I want to do this one by one. And let's go ahead and hit save all settings. So our site here, I probably could have made this a more generic name. So let's call this home server, because I think we're going to be able to reuse this site for multiple resources. So let's save that. And then let's actually go ahead and up the Nginx container. So let's cd into the new container. And then let's do a Docker compose of this as well. Docker compose up, I should say. And then now we can actually see that the home server is online. So that tunnel has been configured. So let's go to resources and let's add a resource. So this is going to be Immich, and then we're going to use the home server site. And then we're going to choose HTTPS resource. And then we're going to add the full domain. So I will say immich.thomaswildtech.com. And we already have the wildcard certificate for this domain. So should be good to create the resource. And then we're going to go right to Immich. So in this network diagram, what we're going to do right now is go straight here. So this is just an HTTP connection, even though our clients are going to have HTTPS, which is going to be terminated at our Pangolin instance. So we're going to do it straight to Immich for now, and then I will show you how to set up a reverse proxy and then do HTTPS to it. So HTTP, we're going to use the IP address of the server. So that's the 192.168.4.248. And then the port is 2283. Oops, that's 248. And then just hit add target. So you have that enabled. So we're going to say enable SSL HTTPS. That means that the client is going to get HTTPS to the server, even though between the tunnel, we just have HTTP. I know that kind of confuses some folks, but that is just the connection from the tunnel to the resource. And that is just running on HTTP. And then save all settings. Okay, and I'm also going to take away the authentication so that we can just get right to the resource. Save users and roles. And for Immich, if you want your share links to work without some authentication layer, you're probably going to remove this authentication setting. And then for whatever reason, the domain is not correct. Okay, immich.thomaswildtech.com. So you can create a wildcard DNS record, but I'm going to just use individual records because I have other subdomains going other places. So we are going to go back to our DNS settings and we're going to add a new record for Immich using our same public IP address. We're not going to use Cloudflare's proxy, just DNS. That's all we want, DNS only. And we're going to save that. So now we should be able to hit our site, immich.thomaswildtech.com with HTTPS. So it's working. Let's see if we can sign in. Okay, so public URL. I'll just sign in from my phone from 5G just to show that this is a public website. Let's go to immich.thomaswildtech.com and boom, we're there. Okay, so this is one way to do it, but I still like to advocate for having your own reverse proxy on your server, especially if you have connections coming in from other places too, so that we still have kind of a universal access log of truth here in our reverse proxy. It's kind of like a last gateway that you have to get through. I do feel better about routing to a reverse proxy. Plus, yeah, if we're going to use, DNS context awareness with other HTTPS connections to that same domain, we need to have our own reverse proxy. So let's go ahead and set up Nginx Proxy Manager on the server just because it is very easy to set up. So let's create a folder for npm. It's going to be Nginx Proxy Manager. And then let's create a Docker compose .yaml file there, and then I will just go to Thomas Wild Tech, and then I'm going to find my Docker compose file with Nginx Proxy Manager and GoAccess, because I do want to show you how to get the real IP that the client is connecting to Pangolin from. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this Docker compose file and paste it here. Okay, so this is our Nginx Proxy Manager Docker compose file. And we also have GoAccess here, which is going to be looking at the Nginx Proxy Manager logs to give us a very easy to set up dashboard. So let's cd into npm and do a sudo docker compose up and d. Oh, and I didn't save the file, so of course, let me save that. And then let's try that one more time. Okay, and let's go ahead and configure Nginx Proxy Manager. So we're gonna use that same IP address, except we're gonna go to port 81, and the initial email is admin@example.com, password change me. Go ahead and change this up, change the password here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is let's create a proxy host for our domain. Go to proxy host and add proxy host. So we're gonna do Immich, same domain, thomaswildtech.com. We're gonna stick with HTTP and we're gonna do the same thing. Basically, we're gonna go to the, now I could do the IP address of the server. I am running this in host mode, so I can also just do localhost. Let me double check that real quick. Oh yeah, I'm running this in host mode. If you have an error with the ports, you can just comment these out. So you don't need to have the ports if you're in host mode. And if you are in host mode, I can go right to localhost 127.0.0.1. If not, you would just use the local IP address of your server. And then we're gonna go to port 2283. So we do need the WebSocket support, and I'll go ahead and do block common exploits, and that is all. So we're not going to do SSL just yet. Let's go ahead and save this. Okay, so now let's route the domain from Pangolin to Nginx and then have Nginx route that request to the server. So let's go to our resources and we're going to edit this. And now we're going to do HTTP, and then we're going to go to port 80 because that is what Nginx Proxy Manager is listing on for HTTP connections. So save all settings, and then let's see if our domain still works. And it does, sure enough. So now we are going through the proxy. Let's also look at the GoAccess logs. So GoAccess is listing on 7880. So let's open up GoAccess 7880. Okay, and GoAccess says nothing's happened. So let's take our proxy down. Let's take it back up. Okay, and now we can see GoAccess is actually working. Okay, so we're just getting 200 and 300 status codes, so that's great to see. But this is what I'm going to be curious about is the IP address here. And it does seem that Nginx Proxy Manager is already using the forwarded host IP. So that's great. We didn't have to do anything else to make sure that we're actually getting the real client IP. This is my home internet service provider. So similarly, if I look at my phone and we turn off Wi-Fi and I try to hit the site, boom, instantly, you can see I have another hit here from T-Mobile. Okay, so now we're using Pangolin and we're using our Nginx Proxy Manager on our home server. I'm not going to go over setting up a dashboard on Pangolin in today's video because it is just already going to be really long. So the next thing we're going to do is let's do an HTTPS connection between our tunnel and Nginx Proxy Manager. So to do that, we are going to go to SSL certificates and we are going to create one. So the domain name is going to be the same domain name. Actually, the domain name is going to be a wildcard. thomaswildtech.com, just like we did with Traefik inside of Pangolin. So we're gonna do the same thing here locally. We're gonna use the DNS challenge. We're gonna select Cloudflare, and I'm gonna use that same API token that I used inside of Traefik. So we'll hit save, and we'll let that pull a valid certificate. Now that we have the certificate, we can force SSL, do a redirect basically. So let's go back to our proxy host, edit the proxy host, and now we're gonna change the SSL. So we are going to use our wildcard certificate and hit force SSL. And we are going to add HTTP2 support as well. So that is good. So it's still HTTP between our proxy and Immich, but now we're also terminating an HTTPS connection here at our own reverse proxy. So we have let's encrypt SSL, and now we're going to change our Pangolin. So instead of going HTTP to Nginx Proxy Manager, we're going to go HTTPS to Nginx Proxy Manager to port 443. And then so let's save that. And again, the reason why we're doing this is because we might have other DNS servers that are pointing right to our proxy, our own proxy, that are not using the public DNS going to Pangolin. So if you use Tailscale or you're just on the local network, you're going to want to go straight to the proxy with HTTPS. You need to put the domain name as the TLS server name, and go ahead and put it in the custom header, host header. Now save all settings, and Immich is going to work. So let me just check out the redirect, make sure we got a new incognito, and it all works as intended. The client all the way to our own reverse proxy. So this is HTTPS and this is HTTPS going through port 443 to our Nginx Proxy Manager. Okay, so we installed CrowdSec when we installed Pangolin, and that should come with a Traefik bouncer. So let's verify that we have that CrowdSec bouncer within our reverse proxy in Traefik. So let's do a sudo docker exec-it CrowdSec CS CLI bouncers list. And here we go. We can see that we have that Traefik bouncer in there. Now another good command is CrowdSec CS CLI metrics. And we can see all of these metrics for CrowdSec. And we can also look at its decisions. So it looks like CrowdSec is already helping us out here. So we can also look at the community guides here and go to CrowdSec. Again, it's already been installed, but let's go ahead and try giving ourselves a 1-minute ban with just the Traefik bouncer. Okay. So we're going to copy that, and then we need to put our WAN IP in here. So the public IP of my network. So this can be found if you go to something like whatismyipaddress.com. So I'm going to copy my IP address and then I'll paste it in there. Let's try that again with sudo. Okay, and then the decision was successfully added. So let's see if we can access our page, and we cannot. So let me actually open up a new browser here, and you can just see that we're getting a 403 forbidden, right? So that is because the Traefik bouncer is working, or the CrowdSec bouncer within Traefik. Now let's wait until that 1-minute ban is up, and then I'm going to show you how to install the Firewall CrowdSec bouncer 2, which is going to give us SSH protection on the server as well, and it's going to force these bans to occur on the firewall layer on the IP tables rather than only in our reverse proxy. So let's sit here and wait. Okay, so now it works again. That ban has been removed. We're going to secure the host system with another CrowdSec bouncer. By default, only Traefik requests are secured through the CrowdSec bouncer. To extend protection to your host system, i.e. SSH, follow these instructions. So we are going to follow these instructions here. Install the CrowdSec repositories, paste that. Now we're going to install the Firewall bouncer. Let's copy this and paste. Say yes. Create an API key for the Firewall bouncer to communicate with our CrowdSec Docker container. So we'll call it VPS Firewall. So let's run that. And I'm going to do it with sudo. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this API key here. And now we're going to nano this file so we can insert the API key. Okay, I'm going to do a sudo nano. And let's delete that. And let's paste in our API key and write that out. And now let's go ahead and restart the bouncer with sudo. Okay, and then we need to update the Docker Compose file to expose communication port 8080 for the CrowdSec container, and then restart the container. So let's look at our Docker Compose file, CrowdSec ports. Let's put the 8080 in there, and then I'll just take everything down and I'll take everything back up again. Okay, up D like that. And once again, we can just check our bouncers now. And now we see we have 2 bouncers, Traefik bouncers, as well as the VPS firewall. So that's great. Now we're bouncing bad IP addresses at the firewall layer before they even get to our Traefik reverse proxy. And the last thing I want to show you is the Geo Block feature, which integrates right into Traefik. I'm going to save metrics and dashboards for, I'm going to save that for another video. So let's go into Geo Block here. Okay, so we're going to add this to our Traefik config file. Entry points web secure HTTP middlewares Geo Block. So we're going to add Geo Block right here. And then under experimental plugins, we're going to add Geo Block right there. Now let's go into the dynamic config file. Okay, and then let's add this Geo block right underneath CrowdSec here. So it's going to be right here. All right, so that looks good. And then we're going to say blacklist mode to false. And then so that's basically we're whitelisting the countries here. So basically let's go ahead and whitelist USA. And then we're also going to not allow unknown countries. So if you are going to be connecting to your Pangolin via Tailscale, then that might you might end up getting blocked if you're actually using the reverse proxy in Tailscale. So I'm not going to be doing that. This should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now what this is doing is it's using an API to check the country codes for the IP requests. In the future, I might look into seeing if we can just do this locally with a GeoIP2 Lite database. But for now, I am fine with just using the API. Oh, okay. Look, I put this in the wrong spot. So this should not be within the CrowdSec block here. So let's look at that again. Okay, so it needs to have its own Geo block right there. So we can put that right under middlewares. Okay, and then let's change that to US again. And then let's restart Traefik once again. And let's see if we're working. And we're working again. Check my phone. All right, so I'm using Proton VPN on the free service. Let's see where it takes me. Hopefully to another country. Okay, so I'm in the Netherlands now. Let's see if I can refresh. Ooh, and I cannot. 403 forbidden. Okay, so now we know that the GeoIP block is working. Hey guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope you learned a lot in this Pangolin tutorial on an Oracle free tier virtual private server. I'm going to be doing some more stuff with both Pangolin and the virtual private server. So with Pangolin, I want to show you how to use the CrowdSec dashboard and even create your own dashboard for Traefik so that we can kind of see what's happening in our Traefik logs in the virtual private server. I'll show you how to back up everything in case Oracle does take down your free server, which has been known to happen. So we should be using some Copia backups. And then I'm going to show you how to do a host on the server itself, not through the tunnel, so that we can maybe run Uptime Kuma so that we can kind of monitor some of our other self-hosted services. So there's a lot that we can do with this. Maybe even go through some DNS context awareness examples. Make sure to check the links in the description because I do have some other great videos that pertain to DNS context awareness if you're hosting your own DNS servers too. Otherwise, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.